I'll go through on screen if you can see because my desktop will be up here for you guys to see. So, in production, in making anything, if we were going to make a movie today, and I'm going to put my hand up here from one side, if we were going to make a movie today and it was going to, expand all this length, most of the time is spent in development and pre-production and marketing. There's a very, very small portion when you're actually filming and you're spending a lot of money. But probably almost half of that time frame, maybe 2 years, 10 years, you hear people at the Oscars all the time talk about this kind of stuff. You could spend half of that time marketing, developing, and finding the right project. And it's from the idea, it's from all these things that you need to put together. But, people want to come and be on set and watch, and it's like, man, that's boring. That's what we're doing to actually manufacture the film. The fun, the creativity, the magic happens in the development and the pre-production process. I've got a document that you can find online, but I've got it, and hopefully we'll send it all to all of you, which is what the Academy and the Producers Guild of America uses to determine what a producer is. In the feature film business, and I know not all of you are making feature films, but in feature films, the producer is who picks up the last Oscar, the best picture. And that's because it takes 1, 2, or 3 people, sometimes a lot more, but principally a few people to be the champion, to be the driver, the one who's going to plant the flag in the end zone and carry the ball and deliver it. And that person from beginning to end is why they get the producer credit on a feature film that's accredited by the Academy or by the Producers Guild. And this little 2-page document kind of details all of those responsibilities. So I'm going to minimize this window here. And so you can just see, like in the development process, what it is that a producer is responsible for. I also use this document for people that are wannabe producers and say, well, I'll join up to your project if I can be a producer with you. And it's like, well, do you do all these things? So let me just go through some of these real quickly. So conceive of the underlying concept, selecting the material on which it's based and securing the rights, selecting the writer or writers, supervising that development process, securing the initial financing, and serving as the primary point of contact for the studio or financing entity. All of the good ideas that are out there about movies, I don't think there's any bad ideas. But there's a limited number of ideas that are actually commercial that people will pay to go see. All the things that people think are good ideas are on YouTube. And 98% of those are crap. The ideas that are actually worthwhile and someone besides your mother is going to encourage you about are the commercial ideas that people will buy tickets for. So figuring that out in this development process is crucial. And it's the testing process. It's the process of finding out whether or not anyone else is going to, salute this. Let me just say, in this process, you may be motivated because of something you're doing in your church or with mission, or you want to be in television, or you want to do a feature film, or you think there's something that actually the world would benefit by seeing this. And, my buddy Phil Cook wrote an article about don't follow your dream. And, there's a lot of people that want to be in the movies and want to be in television and want to be making a web series, and they feel like God is calling them to it. But, there's a whole process I think you need to go through in figuring out, is that confirmed by other people in the body of Christ? Is that confirmed by other professionals? Are there other people that recognize that you've got talent, or are you the only one carrying the flag? And I think it's real important that you sort of figure that out before you get disappointed by years and resources that get spent, wasted. I told the guys earlier in a pre-call that I spoke at a church, and one of these guys called me back and said, hey, that was terrific. We've got a project. It's awesome. We've got a lot of momentum. All the things you talked about, what is in a successful movie, we have them. And they spent an hour with me on this last Saturday talking to me about how this is the best thing since sliced bread. They got 100,000 followers, and they've got, this magnificent story, and people that want to help them make the story, and, on and on and on. And would you look at the screenplay? And I said, I'll look at the first 20 pages. If I can get through that, and there's something there, I'll look at that. So they sent the screenplay, and I looked at it, and it was horrible. It was horrible. It made no sense. It was an idea I didn't care about. All the things that I talked about in this little seminar, none of these things were present. And yet they said they had all these followers and momentum, etc. And so I sent them back a scathing email, and I cut them off at the knees and just said, this is just not going to happen. Who are the people encouraging you? Who are the people saying that this is, so wonderful? Because I just don't think it is. And so I tend to be brutal about some of that stuff because, there's so few dollars that are put into media for Christians that I want to be sure that it's being spent wisely and it's confirmed by other people who actually have made movies or made television or made web series. Do they think it's a good idea? Are they going to vet that for you? And then a little down further in the document is pre-production, which is, selecting the director and the production staff, selecting the cast, selecting the other crew that you're going to put on the picture, like the DP and editor and visual effects, location scouting, preparing a budget and a schedule, and then involved in the shooting script and the consultation of that and approving the final schedule. I'm about to start a movie called The Giver, which will shoot in South Africa with Philip Noyce, and we're right in the middle of this process right now of going through lists. So let me minimize this document, and let's talk about the pre-production. We're doing a couple of projects. I don't want to show that one yet. Sorry, I don't want to show that one yet. How about this one? Yeah, we're out trying to get investors. We've put together a package, a story about Ashley Smith. This is a gal who read a section of The Purpose-Driven Life to a killer, and he let her go. And Rick Warren's behind it, and it's because of The Purpose-Driven Life, it has a lot of momentum to it. So one of the things that we do in pre-production, in development actually, before we get into pre-production, is try to develop some kind of document that kind of concisely says all these things. So this is just an example of what we did in talking about how big the project is, if there's any rebates, because everyone wants rebates. That's a flavor of the week today. And just sort of summaries of the financing stuff, a little bit about the story. We put, pretty pictures in because people like to see pretty things. Rick Warren on Time Magazine. And then give a little about the story, a little about the production team, what they've done, a little about the market, who's going to come see this movie, how are we going to get there, because that's the second half of that timeline I was talking about. Almost as important as the pre-production and development is the marketing. Who's going to come see this movie? How do I get to them? It's a noisy marketplace. How do I rise above the noise level and get to the target audience? So we talk about the audience that's there and how to market it, and then get to some very specific bullet points about what we're wanting them to do, and that's it. So that's like a 4-page document that we put together, with partners that are going out to help us raise money. I've done a couple of different versions of this in pre-production. This is a shorter one, and a different price point. As you work on projects longer, you figure, oh my gosh, I got to do this for less and less. So anyway, this is a different version, a little more text, a little less pretty pictures, but it's basically the same information, trying to digest it in a 3-page document. For those that are really way into it, we do it. We do it in a fully expanded. This is a 42-page document that goes into much more detail, almost like an offering would be, that tries to capture all of the risks and rewards of all that. So you don't need to do this, but just to give you this is just an example of how these are put together. And these are not off the shelf. These are not. There's sections of this that are, we copy and do, but it's not. This takes a lot of time to do this, and a lot of times there's outside firms that'll do this for you. We have experience. My business partner Terry Botwick and I have enough experience doing this. Maybe there's a page here that I can show you a little faster. Sorry, all this stuff here. We'll talk a little about, for people that just don't understand or know the movie or television business, a little timeline of, and you can find all this stuff online. This is not private or confidential information, but how the money flows back for investors that are going to put up a substantial amount of income. So there's plenty of examples out there to do that. And then if you're really knowledgeable and have some business background, ultimately for the sophisticated investor, you want to do a P&L analysis. You want to see, okay, if we make the movie for $5.3 million, here's what we think we need to achieve for break even in domestic, box office, international, and then how it flows through all of the domestic, international, video, pay outlets. And we do a 10-year P&L to see what the potential is for return and all that. But you have to have a little more business experience to do that. But your sophisticated investors may want to know that. All of that is to try to present a package and put it on paper quickly so people can digest it, and you can get that information. Now, when we go back to the development process, selecting the writers and working on the script really, is about your creative instincts. There's no substitute in finding writers or any other crew member. You got to read stuff these people have written. You need to read 3 or 4 pieces that your potential writer has written. Have those actually gotten made? Have other people worked with them? How are they to work with? It's like checking references on anybody that you'd hire. And it's surprising to me that a lot of people don't do that. So we did a project for Korea. We went through about 10 writers. We read probably 25 or 30 scripts. We selected 3 or 4 of those writers to come in and say, okay, why don't you come in and tell us how you would write this idea, pitch us on how you're going to do it. And then out of those 3 or 4 that we met with our partners, then we selected one and then hired them. So that process takes time. There's no substitute for the hard work of just doing, your homework about that. Financing is always difficult. It's always tricky to find people who are excited about being in the movie business. One thing I would say to you as you go through this process is, people say, I've got a friend who could invest in this, and, you want to track down all those leads, but ultimately you want to be eyeball to eyeball with who's going to write the check. And generally, you're talking with 2 or 3 levels away from the money, and that stuff is usually a waste of time, and I wouldn't spend too much time doing that. You want to get in front of the person who's going to write a check. It just gets convoluted. There's lots of wannabes, and you want to be in front of the person who's going to write the check and let them see the passion and the ideas and the viability and the market for what you have. You don't want a second or third level person who's expecting to get some kind of finder's fee pitching your project. You want to do that because you have the best take on that stuff. So pre-production, this is what I'm at in the Giver right now. You can see this on your screen, and we're just getting to that crew level. So we'll do. Let me see if I find another document here to pull up. This is just an example of an Excel spreadsheet that lists. Let me just see here. taking a little bit to load. Sorry, I should have had this up. You know, we can see with production designers, and we've just used IMDb Pro. You can see the person's name here. You can go right to IMDb Pro and get all of their credits. If they have a reel on some of the DPs, we can actually go and see, let's see here. You can go and see their reel. You can jump here and see some of their work. So, you know, we make lots of lists of lots of people and try to go through that and try to do that casting process for the crew in the same way that you would do it for actors and things like that. Actors and trying to get in touch with them. I mean, you know, this is part of why people want to invest in your film. Well, who's in it? I get questions all the time. Well, Ralph, if you've got a project that's ready to go and it's around $5 million and it has an A-list cast, we'd be interested in investing. Well, let me just tell you something. If I had an A-list cast, I wouldn't need you. The difference is you need to find somebody who is enthusiastic about your project, who can add value, and you know, will be convinced that this is viable. If you don't have money to present as you know, in escrow, or you don't have cash you can make an offer, it becomes a lot harder because everybody is after all of these actors. So you've got to find a way to cut through. I think that, you know, it's a lot of actors have agents. That's probably, they're very transactional. They're only about the transaction of making a deal. If you don't have money, if you don't have distribution, if you don't have some of those things lined up, it's going to be very difficult to get their attention or get a return phone call. A lot of actors have managers. You might have a better chance of getting an actor attached to your project through a manager. You may have, some actors have production companies. That's probably the best route to go through because they are interested in more than just the talent's acting ability. It may be about them wanting to produce or direct, and that may be a way to figure out how you can, you know, get these people connected to your project. But it's always about persuasion and salesmanship, and you've got to figure out, you know, the best way to do that. On Ashley Smith, David Oyelowo, who is we met through some other Christians. He's a very professional actor. He was in Lincoln. He's going to play Martin Luther King. We knew somebody. We got to him, and he's been actually helpful with his agents. He's talked to his agents about, I want to do this movie. I want to be involved. And so we've actually engaged him in a semi-producer, executive producer role to help us because he loves the material, sees the value of it, wants to play the killer. It's a great change of venue for him. And so there's lots of different ways to attach actors, but ultimately you got to find something that you're going to offer them that adds value to their career, that you're going to find something unique that they're best suited for. And that's a tricky thing. Just going down the list that everyone else is making of, gee, how can I get to Ryan Gosling? I want Denzel Washington. That may or may not have anything to do with reality. The scouting, one of the things that's not on here, but it's not a requirement, is one of the things I do, and I'm just starting to do this today, is building a calendar for pre-production on a movie. I think as a producer, as an organizer, you have to do that. And so I have a very expensive process that I use. I go to Office Depot, and I buy those big calendars that are, you know, probably 18 by 24. And they fit, each day fits very clearly with, you know, a sticky, this small size 2x2 sticky. And I put that up on the wall and start to lay out a battle plan for when we think we want to start prep, when we want to start production, when does the DP have to come on, when are we going to scout in South Africa, and we just lay that out, and it starts to put very specific details onto the project very quickly, and it also scares you. It shows you how little time you have left, and it's a motivator. For me, it just says, okay, here's what I have to accomplish today if I want to get to these targets, these milestones, these deadlines down the road. I think that's a very successful project or process to use. And then I also use it during production. And I will challenge anybody with a laptop, like a first AD, about changing the schedule. I can move stickies on a calendar much faster than they can move strips on a board or in Movie Magic. And it's kind of a great visual reminder. If I can find a picture somewhere, I'll send that to the guys. So that's kind of the overview of this. If you go further down in this document, you can see that, you know, a producer is involved day to day on set, watching dailies, working with the director on all those consultation items with art direction, costume, visual effects. Every movie or TV show now has visual effects. It's hard to avoid that. And then in post-production, it's about, you know, the composer, the editing, the versions of the movie, working with the director, supporting them, the music supervision, the ADR, the titles, the marketing plan, the distribution plans. There's just a lot of stuff in here that, you know, makes this a very fun job, but also, you know, a very, very difficult. Trying to pack all this stuff in here and watching the time here to get to questions. Talked about attaching actors. I think the opportunity right now for doing movies in particular in the marketplace is extraordinary, because I think at the lower levels we provide the sort of disruptive business that the studios don't want to do. Studios can't make movies under $10 million. They can't do it. They need product. They want to fill those pipelines, but they can't make movies at a price point that you can, not being a studio. You can negotiate with crew and talent much better because you're not Paramount Pictures. You're not 20th Century Fox. And agents understand that. And even places like Searchlight and Sony Classics, you know, they can't make movies for $2 million. They're getting more and more sophisticated in their process. And, you know, the model now has become, my friend Scott Derrickson just did a movie called Sinister. And that model with Ethan Hawke and Jason Blum producing, they made that movie for $3 million. Ethan, Jason, and Scott took no salaries. Scott was writing, directing, and he got final cut, something he'd never get at a studio. And in return, if the movie's successful, those three guys share the profits. Well, that movie is probably going to cross $100 million worldwide as a horror movie. And he'll probably see, I don't know the details, but I would expect he'd see a payday bigger than any studio payday that he's ever seen. And, you know, it's not just 3 minus 100. There's a lot more complexity to how movie financing works, but still he'll do very well. So I think there's great opportunity, and it's exciting in terms of some of that stuff. There's you know, there's certainly the Kickstarter model, you know, which I think is viable, but you got to drill down and see the details of that kind of stuff. You know, the one Veronica that just got a lot of attention, you know, that's because it has an installed base of fans who are already there. And that's why it moves so quickly. It's like the Twilight books that came out. Because there was an installed fan base that was built up for years and years and years, it's why they could trigger that and take advantage of it so quickly. Tyler Perry and his movies, you know, for 20 years he worked the Chitlin circuit of theaters and doing a cash business of doing his short little shows, and then he finally put them on film. Well, he built up an audience. He built up the momentum of that. So I think that works for Kickstarter when you've got that momentum built in a lot of different ways. It isn't just about announcing, gee, I've got a film and I'm on Kickstarter and I'm going to attract $1 million. I think it's a little more complicated than that. It's not just that binary process. We're looking at that. But I think it's viable. I think there's lots of new approaches to this, and I think that's what's exciting. The landscape is changing because there's so many disruptive technologies that allow us to get to the consumer directly. And this is, of course, what has the studios terrified, is because they're the middleman, they're the distributor. They will gravitate more and more to only making $200 million movies because that's what they need to actually manage that enormous distribution equipment that they have installed around the world. They're the only ones who can open Harry Potter on 18,000 screens on the same day, at the same time, in focus, and take tickets at the door and make it work. There's only about 5 or 6 places that can do that. Hey, Travis, let's why don't we jump to questions? I see a few things coming across here, and maybe we can
Great.
be sure we're scratching.
Hey, I'm going to jump in really fast because I'm itching here. But so my first one is, what do you love most about what you do, Ralph?
I think, the best time in what I do is, when the movie is actually shown on opening night. I love going and hanging out in the theater and in the lobby. People don't know who I am, and I just want to hear what they're saying. And if they're laughing at the right time, crying at the right time, they're texting their friends out in the lobby, I know and feel very satisfied that we've done something to deliver some entertainment and got people talking. And, the great thing about movies, at least mainstream movies, is that, I have people talking to me about Hocus Pocus that I made in '93. They're still talking about it 20 years later. I love that.
Oh. Okay, and actually, I wanted to just double-click on Jeff Stainbrook or David Nixon, just because those guys have made features and,
Cool.
had some degree of success. So David or Jess, do you guys have any burning comments or questions, just because?
I'll jump in there. This is Dave here. Great stuff. Let me ask you just an overarching question for everybody's edification. How do you get to break even? Is it truly 2.5 times what the production budget and the P&A is?
That's a rough ballpark. I mean, you have to be very specific about, how you're going to go about it, what your distribution deal is. If you're doing, it's outsized. I mean, like if you're doing Soul Surfer and you spend $18 million making the movie, and you spend $30 million marketing the movie, your formula gets off, because even though they did 40-some million in the box office, only about 20 that's going to come back, and they're going to do a whole lot of DVDs to actually make that thing work and be profitable. Profit is a definition, and you've got to define your terms to see what is profit. It depends on where you are in that waterfall. Are you first in line? The distributor's first in line. He's going to get back his P&A money first, and then his development fee or his distribution fees. Where are you in that waterfall? That definition of profit, the closer you get to the top of that waterfall, the easier it is to define when you're going to be profitable.
Cool. And how about you, Jess? Jess, what movie did you do? I'm sorry, I'm blanking. Hang on, Jess. You're unmuted, Jess. Go.
Put your camera on. There you go.
We did 7 Days in Utopia.
Cool. Great.
Gosh, I don't know that I have questions. I just, I'm really, one, I think Ralph is just kind of, the fact that you're brutally honest, I think, is actually really helpful in this industry. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us struggle through, like David's question of, how do you get to break even? What's it look like for the different things? I mean, there's so many components to making a movie happen, not just from the creative standpoint, but the business side is really important. And I think if we're trying to be good witnesses in the context of not only the story, but how we do the work, that, people need to be rewarded on the back end, and that's a big component.
It is, and I think you got to be transparent about those definitions. And, look, a lot of what I do as a producer is managing expectations. And, everybody's got stars in their eyes and thinks that, this is going to be the one picture and they're going to retire off of this. man, that is so rare. That's like being a walk-on in the NBA, man. You got to be 6'8" and have enormous hands and move like the wind, and then maybe that'll happen. But how many walk-ons are in the NBA? I mean, it just that's the odds of making that happen at Paramount Pictures or 20th Century Fox. It's like being a walk-on. So yeah, that break even for you guys is it's dependent on all these different things. Who's negotiating that home video deal, that network TV deal? If you use a bigger distributor, they've got output deals that sort of predetermine those things at different rates. And ultimately, it's about how you're going to get that market out here, and how you're going to get that domestic revenue, which is the big driver. And theatrical is hard. I mean, I think if I went back and did Cool It Again, our documentary, we might only have done one or two theaters and do more VOD. There's lots more opportunities to get to an audience. Theatrical is very expensive and very risky.
And Jess, I'm curious. So, bro, was your basic funding source a one-check guy? Is that right, Jess?
It wasn't a one-check guy. Although I will say that we had a fairly substantial amount. I mean, there was a donor. We had kind of the mix. Ralph and David, I think, are familiar probably with some of this. We had that mix kind of a project where it was partly nonprofit, partly investor-based. And there's a crazy fine line that you walk in going down that road. But I think we were very clear on the investor side to say, when we say the term ROI, the first meaning for us in this particular project is return on impact. And if you can buy into that, we do have return on investment, but if you're on board with the concept of this really is a kingdom-minded project, and this is where we're dedicating ourselves first. And if you're in at that level, that's great. But yeah, we had a development. The gentleman that funded us had $1 million for development. Yeah. And then that really, talk about a kickstart. That allows you to do all the proper groundwork so that you're not, scrambling through that stuff.
That's right.
The reason I bring that up is because, Ralph, I'm assuming some people think, you get the one-check wonder, but that's just not real. I mean, that's kind of what I was going after. That's
rare. I think you want to limit that. I did a $500,000 movie where we had 17 investors, and man, I spent more time holding hands and singing Kumbaya with those 17 guys, and less time making the movie. So you got to strike a balance in there, and mixing nonprofit and investors who are in it for the profit is even trickier. But yeah, the less number of moving parts you have, the easier chance you've got to make it successful.
Okay, and I'm shutting up now. Travis, you go ahead and take the questions away, because I did preempt everybody, but go ahead, Travis. No problem, Clyde. Thank you. Clyde, a few questions. The first one we had, let's see, I'm just going back up. Let's see, is Crew Tape still in the works?
Crew Tape is still in the works. It's a split rights. The estate has negotiated with 20th Century Fox, and we've heard a pitch, and we're waiting on the estate to make a decision.
Okay. So you've given a little bit of thoughts on Kickstarter to fund projects. I take it you have not done a Kickstarter yet, correct?
I haven't, and we've talked about it a lot, and I think I need to be able to answer the question. Look, it's always wonderful to be introduced and say, your movies have made $2.4 billion and the studio made $700 million. And how much have you made, Ralph? What's your bank account? Well, it's not what you think it is. I need to work for a living. I think about my mortgage, and I have to pay that. I got bills like anybody else. But the perception is different, and so I need to figure out, for me, the perception on Kickstarter is, how come the producer of X-Men is asking me for money? We'll provide an answer to everybody, but I'm dancing around that, for the right project. So we'll figure that out.
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. There's been a few.
On Veronica, there's a little bit of pushback.
Yeah.
But they still got their money. But that's really people that just want to see it happen, and that's okay. Well, we may figure it out for a smaller $2 million movie for aiming at the Christian market specifically. So you may see that sooner than you think. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think I really realize for myself too when I'm making movies, it's who is your fan base? If you have an automatic fan base, then you're a lot better off, because they're interested and they're passionate.
Well, everyone's trying to do that, but it's not necessarily a slam dunk. We're working with Dean Koontz on his series of books called Frankenstein. 5 books, 20 million copies sold, but that still didn't really get the studios excited about making a movie. So we switched to TV and sold it to TNT, and still waiting for them to trigger the pilot script. But you still have to massage that. It isn't a slam dunk because you've got a property that has 1 million followers or 20 million book readers. Getting book readers to be ticket buyers and DVD buyers is not a straightforward formula.
Would you say it's harder or easier to make movies in today's culture and environment?
Yes.
There you go.
It's harder and easier. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
question? Go ahead.
Targets are moving. The targets are moving.
Question from Lisa. So she says that she loves your calendar and posted idea. But if you're still looking for money, if you're still looking for money, how can you do this? So much depends on the money. I guess the question, Ralph, is do you really start doing that calendar thing once you have everything in place?
No. You do. The calendar helps you build a strategy. I think the money wants to know, what's the strategy? How are you going to get there? Have you thought this through? I think you have to do that on every project. The money will trigger it and put it in gear, but you still have to think through, how many weeks of pre-production do I need? How am I going to do this? When is that DP available? I want Kate Mara on this project, but she just took a project. When does she finish? How does that fit? There are so many moving parts, and that's why I use stickies, because I can move that thing around really quick as we, change ideas. And frankly, what I also do is take a shot with my iPhone, and I can preserve that version and store it on iPhoto, store it on Evernote, and I've got that version that I can call back up at any time. But you need that as a planning tool. That's your battle plan. That's you got to put that up on the wall. You got to dedicate a wall to that, and not just a bunch of posters.
That's good. Let's see, another question. And everybody, feel free to be writing your questions in the chat box. You can send that either to myself or to everyone, and I'm reading them off.
I can see them.
Great. The next question is from Bob. When you're working on a narrative film based on a true story, what kind of releases do you need for the protagonist?
Well, on Ashley Smith, we've gotten the life rights as well as the right to the book. So you need to secure those things. I do those with formal documents. I'd maybe run them by an attorney. But, yeah, you need life rights, particularly if they're alive. It's a little different if they've passed on, but you need life rights and any book rights. You want to be sure you control those things. And
follow up to that, Ralph. If the life rights, if the person's still alive and a book was written, but you don't want the rights to the book, can you just go with the life rights?
You can. It's trickier. You got to see then what you got to avoid in the book. It's a lot harder. I'd probably consult somebody legally about that and look for movies that have been made that way, not using any material in the book, but just using their life rights. I think that's tricky. That's hard.
From Doug, Ralph, are there resources or a book you'd recommend for further training on producing?
There's a ton of books. I don't know that I have any specifically. I'd probably go to Amazon and find 10 books, and out of that you'll find something. Find people who've been producers. I like reading some of the old-time books, guys that were making movies in the 40s and 50s, and what's shocking is not much has changed. The process is the same. Different personalities, different pressures, but the process is really the same. I don't have any specific book that I love, but there's a ton of them out there. I'd probably, if I were you, I'd buy like 10 of them and go through them. Or go to the library. You don't have to spend money doing this. Go to the library. There's plenty of stuff in the library. There's lots of resources. And frankly, today, I never had this, but, on every DVD, there's behind the scenes. You can do a 10-minute green screen school with Robert Rodriguez. I mean, there's lots of resources out there to do this. And there's film schools everywhere. You can get, those lists anywhere. I see the next question is about biblical type projects, worried that there'll be a burnout factor. There's going to be a burnout factor if it's bad. I kind of like what Mark Burnett's doing on the Bible. I think it's good television. Do I love the casting, the writing, and the production? No. I think there's going to be a lot of cheap imitations that are going to come out. What I worry most about on the Bible is that the message Hollywood's going to take away is, well, don't spend too much on these things, because that Hollywood, the Christians will watch anything.
Wow.
So I worry about that, because I don't think the production value is great. But what is good about it is it's sort of Christianity light in some ways, because it's a quick, short vignettes of Bible stories. And for part of the audience, they don't want to think too deeply. They just want to hear what the story is. And maybe that drives them to go and open the Bible and go to the source material and read and do that more deeply. I hope that's the case. So maybe it intrigues an audience that may or may not know that Samson had dreadlocks.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the key is, I think, because I've heard a lot of, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And I think that's the key is if it's driven anyone to want to read more about the Bible, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, okay.
You want to
go ahead. You have some? Go ahead. That was probably sent to you privately, but go ahead.
Production designers, it's it depends on the size project. There's plenty of people out there. There's a lot of people out of work. And I think, you can go to the Production Designer Guild and you can get lists of people. You can call agents. And if you have something real and you're going to actually spend real money, there's plenty of people that want to work. And don't just look for the newest, youngest thing that's going to work for you. There's plenty of older folks who are very experienced, and you could benefit from their tricks of the trade that they've learned. Pre-production steps. I think that's kind of in this list here. It's pretty straightforward in any kind of books that you're going to look for, but it's taking each element of the movie and trying to look at that pre-production calendar and say, okay, cinematographer, how much time can I afford on prep? Maybe I can afford 4 weeks or 2 weeks. Well, could I break that up? Could I do some non-consecutive prep? If I'm going to scout in South Africa, maybe I'll chew up a week of a non-consecutive prep with my DP, because it would be important, that long 33-hour trip to South Africa, I need that person there with the director to make some decisions, and that's worth cutting off a week of prep, later in the process. You need to take every department and go through that and say, okay, when do I need a production designer? When do I need storyboards? When do I have to start construction? Well, if I got to start construction here to make this start date, when do I have to have the drawings made? When do I have to, etc. When I've got the set done, I can't have the set done the day before I shoot. I can't do that. I have to have the set done so I can dress it, and then I need time to light it. All those things, you've got to take every department, and that's why you keep moving those stickies around and go, oh my gosh, there's no time to light this set. I got to back everything up. So it's not